Greetings and beyond Venu, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeremy Wormy, and today I'm actually going to be breaking down the reasons as to why RTD firmly decided to put Billie Piper in at the very end of the latest Doctor Who episode. Now, I know a vast majority of people are actually saying it's kind of poetic because we started off with Rose, we're going to end off with Rose, but there's actually a much more hideous and sinister reason as to why they did this, and you can actually end up seeing it throughout the viewership data. And when we actually go over to the viewership data for season 15, we can see that routinely this is some of the worst viewership data of all time. Even when it comes to the season finale, this is actually the worst viewership ever for a regeneration episode. And throughout this entire season, almost every single episode is in the top 10 for the worst rated episodes of Doctor Who. Primarily why I really wasn't doing many videos like this. If every single episode is just worse than the last via viewership data, you start wondering how many times can I actually tell you how bad it is before it gets into your head. But this is the key reason as to why they brought Billie Piper back, is because this series is dead. And when you compare the numbers from last season to this season, it's scary how awful it became, because last season had some of the worst rated episodes as well within Doctor Who history, and included a Christmas special that was the worst rated Christmas special in all of Doctor Who history. The show just continued breaking record after record for the worst rated episodes, and it's honestly sad to see, because at one point in time this show was a very special place in several people's hearts. It was always more niche, yes, but it was something that people could relate to and identify with on a much deeper level. A madman in a box who was going out there trying to have people be clever instead of overtly violent. It was different, and it was the staple for what sci-fi shows were supposed to be moving forward. It was the father of all that, and it's awful to see where it is now. And considering the series has only been able to go on so far with the help of Disney, and we know that Disney is basically pulling out at this point. Russell T. Davies has said as much, and the BBC continues to say the exact same line over and over again. We have to wait to see what happens at the end of season 2 to decide whether or not we're going to do a season 3. And even Russell T. Davies came out and said that the show's probably going to go on a massive hiatus for a long period of time. And after Ncuti Gatwa came out and said that they're filming season 3, the BBC ended up cutting that portion from the Grand Northern Experience. And the reason for this is because the viewership data is atrocious. And I know a lot of people like to throw out streaming data and say that it's popping on streaming. Look, it's always being promoted over on Disney Plus. Look, all the views are coming in via the streaming data, iPlayer, things like that. We actually have evidence to support that that's not happening. I bring you over to the latest top 10 posts from Samba TV streaming data, and when you take a look at this, you see that Doctor Who's nowhere up here on the list. Even when you go over to the Nielsen streaming data, it doesn't matter where you look on this chart, Doctor Who doesn't show up. You can take a look at overall, you can take a look at originals, you can take a look at acquired, it doesn't show up. And the reason I bring these points up, and the reason I bring up Samba TV and Nielsen data, is because, well, The Acolyte was picked up on both Samba TV data and Nielsen data. Yes, it ended up falling off, but the reason I'm hammering this point home is The Acolyte was canceled because it had such low viewership. If The Acolyte is getting picked up, and you know that that show got canceled for having some of the worst viewership of all time, what does that lead you to believe is going on with Doctor Who? And we can even use the latest comments made by Tony Gilroy of Andor fame, in which he openly said that streaming is dead, and the main reason for that is there's no money in it. I mean, for Disney, this is $650 million. In season 2, they said, streaming is dead, we don't have the money we had before. So we fought hard about money, but they never cleared anything up. There is no money anymore within the streaming market. Disney doesn't have any money to actually stream, and they're going to be throwing away one of their top brands, Andor, because they can't afford to make it anymore. And if they can't afford to make Andor, which people praise all the time, what do you think is going to be happening to Doctor Who if we know nobody's watched it at all on Disney, and we see what the BBC data is actually at? It's atrocious at this point in time, and it's pretty self-explanatory as to why we got to this point. It's because of the stringent focus on this hyper-progressive ideology that even some of the most ardent defenders can no longer defend. We can come over here to this article from the Metro, where they openly say Doctor Who's moral lectures are becoming harder to justify. And this is coming from Aisha, who also famously wrote, "Sorry, straight white men, Doctor Who was never made just for you."
Damn, what kind of stupid are you?
This was somebody that was meant to be defending the show over and over again, put out an article attacking the fans, and is even now coming out here saying that the show's just too much for them to defend. Hey, we can even go over to one of their chief stands, Mr. TARDIS, where Mr. TARDIS has several tweets coming out here telling us that he's not too happy with what's going on here, and even has a video openly saying that Doctor Who is in a awful state right now, and even he can't be defending it.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Honestly sounds kind of toxic of Mr. TARDIS, but that's besides the point, because one of the death nails in this all is the BBC themselves have come out here and said that the show's a joke.
That in terms of like how many people are watching and what Doctor Who represents now, I've had a really interesting text. This is from Andy, who says, I'm a guy who considers himself of the left. Most of my friends are women, some are trans, some are gay. But even I cringe watching an episode of Doctor Who. It's no longer a family show about space and time travel. It's literally a bunch of memes telling us that white straight men are the source of all evil in the universe. It's aimed at 12-year-old girls, but watched by a declining number of people over the age of 40. If Doctor Who is dying, it's because the BBC has killed it. Yes, there were always stories that had messages or storylines about the environment or the misuse of power or intolerance, but now it has just become an intolerant programme condemning most of its viewers simply for existing. Now, it's interesting because when I watched this 20 minutes, it was just kind of randomly on, I was pottering around, it was on. I didn't feel as strongly as Andy feels, but I did notice like the diversity of the characters, and I was just like, okay, so this one's this person, this one's this person, this one's this person.
Yeah.
Fine, but I can see why Andy is saying what he's saying.
Sometimes it does feel like you're being lectured to. I think it really depends, depending on, who you are and kind of how much involved and how invested you are in this episode.
How does Doctor Who, like, the people over 40 still watching it and still wanting to relate to it in the same way? Like, you can't.
Or enjoy it. Just enjoy it and have that nostalgia. Maybe that's what Andy is saying. He feels alienated from even having that experience.
Yeah. But in the bits I have seen, I do kind of agree with him, because sometimes it does feel like you are being lectured to. I think in the few times we've had to watch it for must watch, because I never watch it by choice, I've come in and said exactly the same thing as Andy. So he's not imagining it. He's not alone. And, that I have always wondered if, how do you keep making a show if it is just lecturing at people and you're not just getting the time travel, space nonsense stuff?
Even the BBC, the group that puts Doctor Who out and has been leading the charge on some of these more hyper-progressive ideologies that are being shoved into content, is even saying that it's too much at this point. And if you're a fan, it's nearly impossible to watch. These people praise all this stuff being shoved into shows, and even they're decrying what's happening here. And now to go back to the center point of this video, because I can lay out all this stuff over and over again. I can show this stuff to you over again. Declining viewership, people wanting to pull out, the idea that the show's going to be canceled, the fact that nobody's watching it even on streaming, the fact that their most ardent defenders are even turning on the show. I can show that to you all day and night. But I have to explain to you why they went down the Billie Piper pathway. It's because they're desperate. And I'm going to take us back over to what happened at the end of Jodie Whittaker's run, where we had the return of David Tennant. That was a time in which there was actual interest in Doctor Who. It was starting to look like it was about to be rebounding at this point. We had the return of RTD, the man who originally brought Doctor Who back. We had David Tennant, a fan favorite doctor, coming back to reprise his role. And when you actually take a look at the viewership data, it's really telling what was going on there, considering that very first episode within the 60th special saw a 5.08. That was huge at the time, because during Jodie Whittaker's run, they only ever saw a 4 prior to season 1. People were actually talking. People were actually discussing what was happening. And that's why it hurt all the more that once that first 60th episode came out and we saw what was going to be happening, how it was going to continue just being the same stuff from Chris Chibnall's era, but worse this time, people signed out. People walked away. But this is the reason as to why they're bringing Billie Piper back. They want to recapture what happened during the 60th anniversary, when people were becoming more and more interested in the return of David Tennant, when people were actually curious about what was going to be going on here, and when people thought that Doctor Who could be saved. But the key term there is they thought. We have now lived within the current RTD era for 3 years at this point. We know what we are getting. We know what he decided to do, and it's not good. People have walked away from the franchise. And because the BBC and RTD aren't really clever, they think that they can just do it all over again and get the same response. But in reality, all we are seeing right now is that people are seeing right through it and are calling a spade a spade. It's very obvious to anybody around that them bringing back Billie Piper was a predatory action. You can have people come out here and say it's poetic all they want, but in reality, they're just coming out here trying to prey upon your nostalgia of a character and try to boost numbers yet again within a dying brand that even their most ardent defenders can no longer defend. And the saddest reality is, yes, you could have brought everybody back with the 60th. Yes, you could have had people actually praising Ncuti Gatwa, but instead they decided to listen to Ncuti Gatwa and touch grass. Instead, they decided to do what Jinx Monsoon said and just leave, because Jinx Monsoon was so adamant that for every transphobe that was going to be leaving, they would get 1 to 2 people that were so excited to see queer and LGBTQ representation on the screen. Well, those numbers never came about, and now you got this. But hey, that's just my take on all this. Let me get you guys' thoughts on all this down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it out, friends, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell for every time I put out a video and go live, guys. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.